We think that the right thing to do should feel good, but it doesn't. We think the right thing to do should be appreciated, but it isn't. This is a very popular movie, but it catches these two main characters at a time of a huge decision. And here's the thing. 20 minutes before this scene happened, Kelly had no idea this decision would be out there. And probably 20 minutes beforehand, Jack had no real idea that this decision would be facing him like it did right then. I'm going to read a couple texts today. First is out of Isaiah chapter 30, verse 21. And it says, "And your ears shall hear a word behind you saying, 'This is the way, walk in it.' When you turn to the right or when you turn to the left." I'll also read Ephesians chapter 5, verse 15. "Look carefully then how you walk, not as unwise but as wise, making the best use of time, because the days are evil." I want to talk about how we make decisions. I'm going to start off with how not to make a decision. And this is, I think, where most people are at. And that is this. Does it feel right? And if it feels right, that's the decision. We have companies that have made that their logo. This way of deciding is based on emotion and temporary circumstances. But the thing is, emotions are tricky things. All of us know what it's like to go to bed at 11:30 at night in the best mood possible, and you wake up at 7 in the morning cranky for no reason. Do you realize that once in my marriage life, I was awakened by a slap out of a cold sleep? And I woke up and I said, "What on earth is going on?" And my wife was mad at me. I mean, mad at me. She had dreamed that I had an affair. And I said, "I don't care what you dream. Don't get after me about it." That didn't work either. A more understanding voice was necessary at the time. But you wake me up like that, the understanding voice is typically maybe a little farther away. Have you ever done something like this? You go somewhere for a weekend. I'll change the location from service to service. You go up to Minocqua, get a little cabin on a lake. You spend the weekend up there. And I mean, you have a wonderful time. You eat at the Thirsty Whale in Minocqua. You have a great, that's an actual place. And you have this wonderful weekend. Everything is perfect. And you get done, you're driving home, and you're coming down 51, which is an actual road. And you say, "We got to do that again." That was the perfect weekend. And so it's now 3-4 years later. It's a particularly stressful time. You say, "Dear, what we have to do, we got to go back up to Minocqua. Remember that perfect weekend we spent?" Yes. So you make the plans. You stay at the same cabin. You eat at the same places. You visit the same things. You do the same activities. Except this weekend, it just falls flat. How was it the one time you do the exact thing and it's just a wonderful weekend? You do the exact same itinerary and it's not the same. Emotions are tricky things. The emotions we feel will not often be present the next time the exact same situation occurs. There's also another false premise we have when we carry this into decisions, and that's this. There is an authentic self within me. And if I can tap into my authentic self and let this decision on my authentic self emerge, then that must be the way to go. By the way, that's where culture is right now. On everything. Except the church has taught for 2,000 years, quite correctly, that whatever's authentically, naturally within us is flawed. It's corrupted. It's kind of bent toward making the wrong decisions about almost everything. So maybe whatever's authentically within us is not maybe the right thing to do. Because there's selfishness, there's greed, there's lust, there's pride, there's anger, there's bitterness. All that is naturally within. When I was younger, not anymore, I used to be able to say, in my life, I've never been in a fight off of a baseball field or basketball court. You step on one of those things, and that was a different story. I used to, when for a rebound, I'd grab the bottom of my opponent's shorts. Then when they jump, they'd come right back down, often swinging. And then with a surprised look, I'd look at the referee. We know this. Each one of us has a thing. We know that we cannot be trusted when something is presented. Just this week, my wife and I were coming, Friday night, we're coming back from Crystal Lake. It was about 8:30. And we're driving home, and we're coming down. We were looking at the back end of that storm that blew through. Back when everything had that red glow, the sun was setting on the back of that cloud. It had the pinkish red, and the light was really strange. We're watching a little lightning at the top. We're coming back, and I said, "Is there someplace you want to stop?" My wife goes, "Like where?" I said, "Oh, I don't know. I just didn't know if you wanted to stop somewhere, like, maybe get an ice cream cone." And she goes, "No, I don't need an ice cream cone." And I went, "Well, none of us need an ice cream cone. That wasn't the impetus for the question." And she said, No, you can stop and get one if you want. Well, see, I wanted her to get one too. That way I have cover. And I said, "No, I don't need one tonight, but I'm just warning you, sometime the next week, I feel a need coming on." Doesn't have to be now. All of us have something. A donut shop. Ice cream cone. Chocolate. Or something more serious. Alcohol. A drug. That when that thing presents itself, we can't really be trusted. The thing is, that donut feels right. So does the alcohol. Or maybe it's something like relationally, gossip, judging someone else, a critical nature. Often the thing that feels the most right is not the way to make the decision. In our movie clip, first time I'm watching that movie, our emotions are quietly being manipulated and we don't even realize it. There's a part of me that when he went and embraced and they hugged and they kissed, I was like, yes, love wins. They found true love. They're back together. And then I went, whoa, wait a minute. No, that's not right. It felt right. He was the love of her life. You heard her say that. He told her, "I love you more than you'll ever know." Love demands they get back together. That's where culture is. That's not the way to make that decision. If it feels right, means nothing. Almost every really good decision you'll ever make will be made in isolation. The decisions you make with everybody else will almost always be wrong. Well, if that's not a way to do it, how about this one? When a door opens, walk through it. Well, what if the door that's opened is a malfunctioning elevator? Walking through the open door might be a very dangerous step. In our movie clip, the door was open. Very open. The problem is, just because a door is open does not mean you should walk through it. It could be open, because the door doesn't work. It could be open because there's a lot of people that made bad decisions on the other side of that door, and they want other people to join them, so they're holding the door open for you. It could be that you have such a strong rooting interest, you're sitting with a crowbar, prying it open, so you can say the door was open. This policy of walking through an open door is a spiritual way of dodging responsibility. Now, let me say one other thing. There is an element, a small element of truth here, and let me just at least spend time here. I think there might be a time in life where we say, God, I want you to open the right doors for me, but you knew one of those was coming. You need to pray that without a rooting interest in what door gets open. And you need to say, God, my will is going to be out of this. Whatever you desire should be the prayer. And even then, we need to check ourselves to ensure our will's not getting in the way. We need to check ourselves to be sure that we're not overstepping any boundary lines that are there for our best interests. There are things we need to know that we just never go across. I will not steal. I will not take credit for what is mine. I will not pursue any relationship outside my spouse, etc., etc., etc. And I said this in the early service, so worship team, I apologize. We do this in the church. Sometimes, I know on Sunday you're used to this rosy, cheery me all the time. Sometimes Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, my curmudgeon gets let out of the cage. And sometimes Alex is there to witness it. We were having a discussion this week. Here's what happens at the church sometimes. And you've seen this. I'll just call a spade a spade. Sometimes a guy will be at a church, and all of a sudden, behind the scenes, he sends a bunch of resumes out to the district superintendent. Boy, I need to get out of here. I need to get out of here. I need to get out of here. Find me another church. Find me another church. Find me another church. 6 months later, a year later, he finds another church, and then he gets up in front of the church and he goes, well, the Lord has spoken, and I am following God's will. Shut up. No, you're not. I mean, there might be time you have to do that, but don't bring God's name into this. That's dangerous. Maybe the door wasn't open. Maybe we push sometimes. So if just doing what feels right is not a good way to make a decision, and following an open door is not the best way to make a decision, and by the way, both of those ways would have led to a disaster in our movie clip. It would have left a home broken, kids with mom and dad living in different places. And I think you start off whatever, but they were the love of each other's life. That's not the foundation you want to build for that new home. So what's the best way? I read 2 scriptures. I'll add a third one. First one, when we come to a decision we have to make, always listen for God's voice. Isaiah chapter 30, and your ears shall hear a word behind you saying, this is the way, walk in it. When you turn to the right or when you turn to the left. We need to become practiced at listening for God's voice. Here's a couple ways we do it. First thing, I hope sometime during the week we make a point to just be quiet. Now, I'm trying to get in the habit this summer, and I kind of have. First thing I do when I get up most mornings is I take a nice long bike ride. Early, before it gets hot. 10, 15 miles. And then in the evening, sometimes I'll take a walk with Michelle, like from 8 to 8:45, as it hopefully gets a little cool. Sometimes when I'm riding my bike, I'm passing by people, most of them have earbuds in their ears. And I'll say, coming up behind you on the left. And then as soon as I pass them, they jump and startle. Not my fault. I don't know what to do. Now, I'm not putting down walking with earbuds in. I'm not making a universal condemnation, trust me. But we live in a time where every quiet moment seems to have to be taken in or filled up with noise. I hope you have time in a week where the only noise you're dealing with is the voice inside your own head. I hope there's a time in a week you're giving God a chance to speak to you without input. Second thing, I hope you are praying. Praying is not help Aunt Margaret's infected toe, and my niece passed the test, and my husband have a good review. Requests are fine, but that's not prayer. Paul says, in your prayers, make your requests known to God. Request is a subset. Your prayer, God, I'm thankful for this. I praise you for these reasons. I ask you to search my life. I present my very life before you. I want to confess anything that I've done. Confession and thanksgiving and praise. That's prayer. And then you can make your request known to God. That's fine. But part of that prayer is also being quiet and listening for God's voice. I also hope we're reading Scripture. That's a part that I think is a practice that's kind of gone by the wayside now. For 2,000 years, most people didn't read Scripture because it wasn't available to them. It wasn't in their own language. They weren't literate. They didn't have the ability to read. Now we do. Except we get that time crowded out between watching The Bachelor and The Real Housewives of Orange County. I think Scripture needs to be a part of our rhythm and our routine, where it becomes part of us. But as for me, it is good to be near God. I've made the sovereign Lord my refuge. Psalm 121, I lift my eyes up into the hills. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord. Your attitude should be the very same of Christ Jesus. Jesus, though he was God, did not forcibly retain to his rights as God, but laid aside his mighty power. Being found in human form and human likeness, became obedient unto death, even death on a cross. Where it just becomes part of our inner dialogue. That gives God a chance to speak to us. Second thing, I hope we seek wise counsel. Proverbs 12, verse 15 says this, the way of a fool is right in his own eyes, but a wise person listens to advice. I hope you have someone in your life that seeks, that serves as a wise counsel for you. If you're just married, if you're young, I hope you have someone who's been around the block a few times that you can talk to. Oh, I can't do that. Times are changing. Everything's brand new now. I mean, look at this. There's drugs, and there's people protesting and rioting in the streets. Look at all this. Except some of us were alive in 1968, so pipe down. Develop relationships with wise voices. I didn't say you always have to listen to the wise voice, but heed it. Weigh it. Listen to it. If you're a couple and you're just married, find a couple that's been together for 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. Well, I can't really ask them. They've loved each other through all 50 years, and my husband and I are really having trouble right now. If you think that they've loved each other every day for 50 years, you're nuts. They've been through some things. Billy Graham's wife was once asked about 30 years ago, are you telling me you've been married all these years? Have you ever contemplated divorce? I loved her answer. Her answer was, divorce, no. Murder, yes. Trust godly people who've demonstrated wisdom, who've made it through life. Last thing. There are going to be times of life when, for whatever reason, God's quiet. for a lot of different reasons. There are decisions that I'm not sure God necessarily has a concern in. I can pray from now till February, God, do you want me to drive a Ford or a Honda with my next car? I don't really think it matters that much. You can serve God either way. But I want to buy a house. Do I get the one on Elm Street or Maple Street? I think you could serve God equally well in both places. I told this story earlier. It's one I've told, so I apologize if you've heard it. There'll be plenty here that haven't. The year was 1990. My wife and I had taken 30 teenagers to the desert Southwest, just outside of Winslow, Arizona, for a week of work and witness in the sun. On the way back, I think, we stopped in northern New Mexico. We were going to take them whitewater rafting through the Rio Grande Gorge between Taos and Pilar on the Rio Grande River in northern New Mexico. That canyon was about 1,000 to 1,500 feet straight down, vertical walls on both sides. And we're down the bottom of the canyon. Great whitewater rafting trip. This is not one of those Wisconsin whitewater rafting trips where you just kind of drift down the river. This is where you need a professional guide in every single raft. And we had that guide in the raft. It had been my probably third whitewater rafting trip. By the way, I love whitewater rafting. Love, love, love. And we had all these teens. I was in the raft with all the kamikaze boys, all the teenage young men. 5 of them, 1 of me, and the guide. We're in the lead raft because who cares if you do something stupid and lose a bunch of teenage boys? It's no big loss. So anyway, we're the first raft down. So we come around this corner, and I'm sitting next to the guide. I'm in the rear because I have some experience, and he'll tell me when to dig in, I'll dig in. And we come around the corner. I hear the guide say, "Oh." And I turn around and go, "Oh? What do you mean, oh? What does oh mean?" And we're kind of stopped. We're in this little calm spot. And he goes, "You see that rock in the middle of the rapids?" I said, "Yes." He said, "That wasn't here yesterday. And it's about minivan size." Now, this concerned me. I was ready to deal with the river. I was not ready to deal with the minivan falling on my head. And so he stopped and thought about it. He said, "All right, let's take a vote." Now, I'm already in trouble because I'm in a raft with teenage boys. He says, "We can go left of the rock, we can go right of the rock, or we can just hit the rock head on and see what happens." I'm in a raft with 5 teenage boys. Guess what they voted? Hit the rock, hit the rock, hit the rock. So we hit the rock, bounced, spun around, made it fine. They were all yelling, "Woo, that was great, that was great." Here's why I told that story. I think there are times of life when we can go left and it's fine. And I think we can go right and it's fine. We'll rejoin the channel on either side of this rock. And I also think there are times, for whatever stupid reason, we'll just decide we're going to ram the rock anyway. Can I tell you something? The master guide to any river in life is already in our raft. And if we make a bad decision, he's there to get us back into the channel. Sometimes there are decisions where God will seem quiet. Sometimes God's voice is tough to hear because of life. The last 3-4 months we've just been through is one of those periods of time. I think it might have been hard to hear. A lot happening. Maybe there are different routes of freedom. And in those times when we don't know, here's a guide. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 15. "Look carefully how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise, making the best use of your time, because the days are evil." When we don't know which way to go, here are some things to ask ourselves. What is best for everyone involved? Where will I be most productive? Which way will I do the most good? Which decision will I reflect holiness and righteousness more easily? Which way leads to peace for people involved? the best use of our time. Sometimes we get hung up on good and bad, and I think we should be pursuing the best. In our film clip, remember our clip? It felt right to return to Kelly. He had her picture in a locket. Actually, I think it was a stopwatch, or a little pocket watch. And when you watch the movie, you're almost rooting for it to happen. Oh, they're kissing. Isn't that wonderful? And certainly, the door was open. After all, he loved her, and he was the love of her life. The two should be together. And if they had done what felt good, if they had followed the open door, it would have left a home and lives, 3 lives, in ruins. Somehow, the right thing to do crept in. Chuck was able to pull back and look at Kelly and say, "You have to go home." That's a long forgotten concept today. That concept is called the right thing to do. We think that the right thing to do should feel good, but it doesn't. We think the right thing to do should be appreciated, but it isn't. A few months ago, I read a story where a bunch of kids in the high school decided they were going to protest. And they're all going to get up at like 1 o'clock and just leave the high school and go out on the lawn. And the principal says, "Don't do it. Here will be the penalty." Kids did it. Principal levied the penalty. Parents got upset. Why? Our kids were protesting. You should tell them, you should reward them for that. Can I tell you something? If you're rewarding, you're not if you're getting rewarded, you're not protesting. If people are patting you on the back, you're not protesting. You're moral preening in front of people. The right thing to do is almost overwhelmingly the difficult thing to do. If you see 98 people going this way and 2 people going that way, I don't even have to know what the decision is. I'm going after the 2 people. And I'll be right 10 times more than I'm wrong. Because almost every good decision is made in isolation. And almost every bad decision is made in a crowd. The right thing to do is often difficult, but each time you do the right thing, it gets easier. We have to exercise our morality and integrity like we do our bodies. We have to get out our right decision making and take it for a walk every now and then. Just about a month ago, I had to take my car in, and I was about 1.5 miles walk home. I took my car in the morning, walked home, little exercise. Here's the thing. In between where I took my car in and my house is a Dunkin' Donuts. And I stopped in the Dunkin' Donuts and I got a donut. Because I'm already walking. I'm walking. I got room to do this. And I got a donut. It's like $1.10 or something like that. All I had was a 20. I gave the girl a 20. She quickly got in, gave me a bunch of stuff, slid it in my wallet, and I saw 20 again. And I counted $38.90. So I was at the door, turned around and came back, went to the counter. I said, excuse me. Yes? And I said, I don't think this is right. I gave you a 20. I should have $18 and change. You gave me $38 and change. I believe this $20 is yours. That's just $20. But she looked at me really strange. And I said, she goes, really? And I said, this isn't my $20. I don't want it. And I handed it to her. Now, that's a little thing. But the more we do those things, the easier those things get to do. The right thing to do is never, ever easy, but it's always wise.